And in the case of Japan, Japan has a sort of unique history in comparison, at least to American news media, in terms of the ties between traditional print media and contemporary television broadcast media. So in 1871 was Japan's first daily newspaper. It was the Yokohama Mainichi, which later just became the Mainichi Shimbun. And interestingly, the reasons behind the creation of the Yokohama Mainichi, it was created by the Japanese government. So it was created during that time where the foreign settlement was located here in Yokohama in the Kanai area, and there were lots of social issues, social problems related to having a foreign community here. And this newspaper was created pretty much by the government in order to communicate with the Japanese community about what was actually going on right here in their midst. And because of the government ties with the newspaper, it was acting in that role of a servant of political establishment, so it was voice of the state. And it was right around that same time, 1874, a couple years after the Yokohama Mainichi was established, that Japan underwent a large sort of political reshaping after the Jiominken Indo, the Freedom and People's Rights movement, Itagaki Taisuke's movement that sought for elected legislature, sort of a democracy movement, looking civil rights and things like that. So this led the Meiji government to establish the Constitution in 1889. And anyway, so through this process, this sort of political upheaval of the time, it was right at the same time that other newspapers began to appear. So in 1874, you get the Yomiuri Shimbun, 1879, Asahi Shimbun. And those two newspapers were created deliberately in opposition to the Yokohama Mainichi. So having only one newspaper, sort of the voice of the government, then you get the Yomiuri and the Asahi to provide slightly different type of content, actually. And there was a lot more entertainment content in both of those, but they were to provide sort of the voice of the people, the voice of the public, and to actually start reporting on what the government was doing. And it was also right around the same time in 1890 that the first Kisha Club, the press club, was created. And the first one was created in the Diet. And I'll be talking about Kisha Club and their role in Japanese media a little bit later. So that's the origins of the newspapers. So you have the Mainichi Shimbun as sort of government voice, Yomiuri, Asahi created as sort of opposition to that. Those roles sort of change over time, but that's the origin story of those three. In the 1910s to 1920s, this would be Taisho period, Japan is transitioning into wartime mode, and that conservative shift created a lot of government opposition towards Asahi newspapers. So it's from this period, and this lasts until today, this sort of tairitu, what is English? Sort of a standoff between the Japanese government and the Asahi newspaper. And then you enter the wartime period, so you have the censorship period from the 30s into the 40s. And that censorship mechanism that was established by the Japanese government concerning print publication was actually utilized by the American occupation after the war in order to sort of inculcate democratic values and sort of anti-communist sentiment in the public. So basically the American occupation continued on with that sort of censorship program until about, I think it was 1951. And then in 1951, free press finally returns to Japan under, I think it was Article 21 of the Constitution. And 1 year before that was the Japanese Broadcasting Act, and that is actually a sort of a pivotal act in Japanese media history. And I just want to touch on that briefly because some of the points of the Broadcasting Act shaped later during Abe's administration sort of the fear factor in media reporting in Japan. So I just want to read a couple points that are in the broadcast law. So this is talking about basically the roles and responsibilities that public broadcast have. So this is Article 3, number 1, that the broadcasting shall not disturb public security and good morals and manners. Number 2, it shall be politically impartial. Number 3, shall broadcast news without distorting facts. And 4, as regards controversial issues, shall clarify the point of issue from as many angles as possible. It goes on from there to further describe what the social function, I guess, of news media is in Japan. But clearly those 4 points are trying to convey this idea that news should be the neutral observer, that they shouldn't be taking on a watchdog role, that basically, don't report politics from any one perspective or side. You have to kind of stand in the middle and impartially report. But, as we know today, impartiality is a very slippery fish to grab when we're talking about the media. So the broadcast law will probably come back up as I talk about Prime Minister Abe's time. So that's kind of the historical overview of the development of the media industry in Japan. I know it's very, very spotty and brief, but it gives you kind of an idea that from the outset, traditional print media, and then from the 50s on, television broadcast media, has this sort of inherent, why can I not think of the word tairitsu in English? Somebody help me. Tairitsu.
Confrontational or something like that?
That would be great, thank you. A confrontational attitude or stance between the Japanese government and certain branches of the media. And this kind of attempt to codify media's role as a neutral observer within the actual framework of the law. So that's kind of the background of the media history.